Hello everyone. In this video, I'm going to give you some tips on the CSS properties and the specificity. So when trying to give a HTML element, so such as the H1 or P tag or any other elements, such as the div tags, you have the CSS specificity, which is the class ID or the inline styles. So you have all three of those. Which one is the highest? Which one is the lowest? So going from highest to lowest, we can go from style, so inline CSS. So if I were to add a inline style as text or color equal is red, and then we add some text. So we add a p tag and then some text, and then we view that. Could see that the specificity of this is higher than the ones for the H1 or the P tag. There's also if I were to do a inline style and then add a class name of name and then add that to the class file of color blue, you can see again the specificity of the order is going to be the class name, because this is an inline style and then this is a class name. So we're defining the class inside of the HTML element, which is the p tag. So the inline style is directly used in the HTML element, and it has a higher specificity, and the browser is going to determine which CSS property is most relevant to the element, and it would rank it based on that. So the browser is recognizing that the p tag, the class name of name, is higher than the style, inline style of color, that's red. So if I were to add an ID, so ID is name, and then I change this to hashtag ID.name, you see that and then I add some text. So text, you can see that the higher specificity is going to be the inline style rather than the ID, because again, the browser is going to determine which CSS property value are most relevant to that element, and it ranks it based on that target element for that property. So then if I were to add a pseudocode of text, so a pseudocode is actually is a before, after, hover, any other pseudocodes. So you have all these pseudocodes. So I can do let's do hover, and then color would be orange. So if I were to hover over the text, you could see that it changes it to orange. But now if I were to add a class name and an ID, I want to do name1, name2, or name1, because the ID would be the same IDs. And then I want to add name1, class name. So then the color would be red. When I hover over the class name, I want it to be blue. But then now I'm going to add the class name of ID name1. Color is going to be purple. And then the hover pseudocode, or the pseudo element of that element, HTML element, is going to be, and then so I just defined the class name hover with this. The hover is a pseudo element, so it's going to show color red. When I hover it, it's going to show blue. For the ID, is going to show purple. And then when I hover over it, I want to show black. So which specificity order would be the highest? Let me know in the comments. So if I were to go back to this tag here, let me delete all that. Now I want to make this text some bigger. So now you can see that I defined the class name and an ID. Again, the order of the specificity is how the browser is going to determine which color is going to be shown. So the ID in this case wins because it's the highest level of specificity for the CSS property, and for the browser to rule which one is most relevant for that element. So currently it's showing the ID, and whenever I hover over it, it's going to show black, because again, the order of the level of specificity, the highest is the inline style, the next one is going to be ID, and then the next one is going to be class, attributes, and pseudocodes. And then there's going to be these elements and the pseudo element, which is a selector targeting the HTML element, which is the lowest specificity. So now if I were to just add a pseudo element, which is any of these. So if I were to do after, is not going to show anything, because after is a after the after element is a pseudocode element, and it specifies that the last child of the element is going to be used for decoration. So meaning it's going to have an underline, is going to have some kind of content, value, or property. So for example, if I were to take that same ID or the class name, and I give this an after, a content of some text, and then make the color green, and then there's going to be a font weight of around 800. That way it's bold enough and it's able to see. So now see that I added the text, and then after it added some text. So this is a pseudo element using the after or before or any other element. So if I change this to before, it's going to show this before, except that's going to cover over the 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 text, because again is going to show before, but it has that if hover effect. I'm not sure when it is, uh, but it shows the text before the text. So it shows some text and then text right before it, and it's did the same thing with the after, where it's text and then some text. Make sure to follow, like, subscribe, and also follow me on Instagram and Facebook and TikTok for more tips like this.